is more personal usage.
Yeah, that was surprising for me to hear. Kind of corroborates a little bit of what I'm seeing on that profound study too. Sounds like a lot of people are starting to use it more so for task generation. So it sounds like roughly 40% of people are using it for task generation. So kind of to me, just kind of seems like it's getting more embedded into work, personal life to get things done,
Yeah.
making it even more important.
Yeah. I've even heard of people using it for like their Christmas gifts. What are they going to get their parents for Christmas, their grandparents? Asking chat, which I think is going to be so interesting if everybody is getting their parents and grandparents the same thing. We were talking about this the other day, and like ChatGPT only has so many solutions and like unique ideas it gives different people. So be interested to see if that kind of changes the landscape of gift giving in the future.
Yeah, that would be interesting too. Or just like the day when you can just say, "Hey, I want you to send this gift to this person at this address." Man,
Yep.
I can see that future right around the corner.
Have you guys used the talk version of it, where you're actually talking back and forth to communicate, not just chatting?
I've messed around with it. I don't use it regularly, but it is a crazy feature.
It's crazy. It sounds so real.
Yeah.
And I've seen other people using it as their therapist too, like to, you know,
That's dangerous.
help me with this. I know.
I should start doing that.
Especially if it's the voice person. I mean, you're truly just having a conversation.
Welcome.
Save me a little money.
Yeah.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I see, oh, Gabrielle uses it for when she cooks. I see a lot of people introducing themselves in the chat. Please do so. Let us know where you're zooming in from, what you're hoping to learn, what your position is, what your company is. I actually use ChatGPT to track my macros and give me workouts.
I've done that too. It's so smart.
But sometimes I have to correct it. I'm like, chicken does not have that many calories.
Does inflate it a little bit, which can be a good thing and a bad thing.
Autumn from New York City, PR. Chris Eleanor Sales in Massachusetts. We've got Phoenix, Vancouver, Wisconsin. I feel like last webinar we had people from South Korea. We had people from all over. All right, so if you are here for the PR and GEO strategies that get you found in ChatGPT and AI search. AI search is rewriting the rules of visibility. Today, it's not just keywords, it's reputation. PR mentions knowledge panels and entity-driven results now shape how brands appear in ChatGPT, Gemini, and other AI engines. So welcome and joining the experts we have here from Go Fish. We've got Patrick, Laney, and Kalina. Kalina is SVP of Owned Media. She leads Go Fish Digital's own media practice, spanning digital PR, SEO, email, and online reputation. Her campaigns have earned coverage in outlets like The Washington Post, Forbes, and Business Insider, plus so many more. She has driven both brand authority and measurable growth through those coverages. And then we've got Patrick. He's our senior SEO strategist. He brings 8 years of SEO and technical expertise with a background in software and product development. He's built scalable strategies and executed technical audits for brands from Fortune 500 companies to fast-growing software as a service startups. Patrick, what's one of those companies? I saw it was a pretty huge company. CVS Health?
Yeah, CVS is one. Yep.
That's right. Lainey Martin, she is a digital PR manager. She specializes in high impact PR campaigns that fuel visibility and links. With 100 plus campaigns delivered across industries, she blends strategy and creativity to earn measurable results. She also mentors team members and oversees Go Fish's internship program. So that's also very cool, Lainey.
Cool. Yeah. Well, just to kind of set the stage, want to talk about some of the things that we're going to cover as we walk through this webinar. Obviously, we're all here to talk about AI search and how we can kind of optimize for of that. So some of the key pillars that we're going to chat through include why links and media mentions matter in an AI first world, how to brainstorm ideas that a journalist is going to want to cover, how to execute digital PR campaigns that drive results, and how to measure campaign level and long-term success. And Patrick's also going to talk about the actual impact of AI visibility and how we can optimize to appear in AI search. So first, before we get into things, want to get a sense of who's in the crowd. So curious to see, are you currently optimizing your site for geo? Options are, I don't know where to start, optimizing but not measuring, and you're doing great optimizing and tracking. Um, we tend to see that a lot of people are coming to us knowing that they need to optimize for geo and recognizing that it is a need, but not exactly sure where to start. So if that's you, you're definitely not alone. But Patrick, Lainey, curious if you guys have any thoughts on what you've been seeing from clients.
Yep, very similar. Kind of, I'm starting to see some of the poll results even come through. It's kind of a lot of questions right now. I don't know where to start. How does this work? How is this new search engine sort of ranking, determining what to show? How can we optimize for it? All of those seem to be open-ended questions that we've got some answers to. So that's good.
Cool. All right, Patrick, I'm going to hand things over to you.
Cool. So yeah, looking at the poll results, yeah, I don't know where to start, and optimizing but not measuring performance seems to be the kind of the top two votes for the audience today. So I think the thing I want to lean into is a little bit about the opportunity starting here. So yes, AI search is a new search engine, right? It is optimizable. So if we know how these search engines are determining what to show and what they're measuring to be able to determine what to show, we can optimize for it. So in the landscape, yes, it's no longer a 10 blue links. We know that, but we know that search behavior has also changed within these AI search engines too. That means that the search behavior is no longer about keywords. It's more about these long tail, so these 200 word searches that people are putting into either ChatGPT or AI mode or Perplexity and others. And they're trying to get things done. They're trying to get their questions answered, things like that. So traditional search, yes, it's dropping a little bit in click-through rate because customers are getting their questions answered through these engines. But because these engines are so good at answering these questions that our prospects, our customers, our users have, the adoption of these platforms is increasing. So that's the interesting news. But the good opportunity and the good news here is that AI search is this opportunity that I want to describe right now. It's a warm-up potential, right? So if you want to get in front of your customers, it's almost like a free sales agent. So it's talking to your customers, it's talking to them about what they might want to know, what questions they might have, and how to get those answered. And so when they do click through and then they do go to your website or do start services or buy your product, the intent is way higher. So it's basically 25 times higher, which is great, meaning that we can use these engines to our advantage as long as we know how to kind of feed them with that data to be able to do the job for us. So it's almost like a free sales agent, which is great. So lower click-throughs, but free sales agent, and then plus higher intent click-throughs of those people that are coming in, which is fantastic, actually. So, what's kind of the key differences? So I mentioned a little bit on like, well, it's a new search engine, so it has different ways that it sort of scores and ranks pages and domains and content. So, how is it sort of doing that? And I like this quote at the bottom. It's not about being the loudest, it's about being the most contextually aligned. So if you think about it in short, it's actually turning from a lexical system, right? That's like traditional search engines that take a search term and try to align it to something that maps most relevantly. And it's actually turning it into a neural system. So that means that it's looking at things more semantically. So you might have questions that are answered on a variety of different pages, and those pages are essentially sourcing up into its summarized answer. So that means that AI is not really just prioritizing the keyword rankings, it's kind of prioritizing the context. So what you say, how you say it, how well you say it, whether it's unique insights, whether it's so closely aligned to what your customers are looking for, the way that you structure that content, the way that it cooperates with your offline authority, things like that, that are kind of all pulling into the data sources that helps these answer engines summarize and address the questions that people are putting into that initial search. So this kind of opens the door for the new discipline, right? And that is generative engine optimization. So kind of the three most important tactics that work. So we've got some case studies around this. You can kind of go through our website and check it out. But the three most important tactics that work is, number one, you do need a benchmark of SEO. So in some cases, these AI search engines are using Google's index or Bing's index to pull in some of their insights, right? If it's not within their training data. So making sure that you're covered in just traditional SEO is some of the foundation that's required in order to appear in AI Overviews, ChatGPT, AI Mode, etc. You do need to have the right semantically aligned content, and you do need to think about kind of your demand mapping, which we're going to talk about in a second here. You do need to have kind of digital PR as well. So that's not just link building, but that's also mentions that are sort of corroborating a lot of what your brand is about, right? Adding to what we consider to be citation grounding. That's the idea that we're talking about a subject. We say we're the best experts in one subject matter. And now the external signal, so other people are also agreeing that we're experts in that subject matter. And then that's kind of the traditional PR too. So you can kind of see where the blend is of those two different things. So it's driving link acquisition, driving brand mentions, as well as try to drive that cooperation from the market that's saying, yes, this entity, which is our brand, does this thing and does it well. So why does it matter? So the way that I want to describe this is that those that get in early will win, and that's the opportunity that's there. Those that start to think about it now will have the long tail impact of that investment, I think, over time. Adoption of these search platforms is increasing as they become smarter, more intelligent, as they answer better questions for users. The adoption is increasing, and we're seeing that even just this year. So I think those that get in early will definitely benefit. But what GEO kind of focuses on that's a little bit different from SEO is all these different data sources. So if you think about it in short, the LLMs are always out there for knowledge capture. That's really their end job. So what we want to do is we want to provide as much data to those LLMs about what matters to us as a brand to be able to influence how it generates and summarizes those answers to end users. So there's a little bit of a difference, but it definitely focuses a lot on kind of your content optimization, brand reference tactics, things like that, and just ensures that you're an authority in specific subject matters. So that way, then you can be sourced into those answer engines themselves. So that's why it matters and why it's definitely important to start thinking about it now. Okay, cool. So like I mentioned, you probably have this question. Well, how is it actually selecting some of these sources? Well, it definitely uses the concept of topical authority. That's what I kind of was describing just then there. That's this idea that it wants to bring in the most helpful resources from the most trusted experts in order to ensure that questions that customers, users have are being answered in the best possible way. At the end of the day, these engines, both ChatGPT and Google, have customer satisfaction that they want to lean into. And that customer satisfaction is ensuring that people are being helped. So the way that it kind of looks at some of these sources is definitely by semantic alignment. So how well are you kind of leaning into that semantic alignment of that individual user's persona and their individual questions they have? And then also to kind of this query fan out method, which is this idea that you're not only just answering one question that a user may have, but you're also answering kind of the subsequent and sort of topically aligned questions that someone might have. So you can kind of think about that in the sense of like running shoes. Maybe I'm thinking about running shoes, but then maybe I'm starting to think about trail running shoes, or maybe I'm starting to think about race day running shoes. And there's a lot that you can go into to kind of be an expert in running shoes. And that's really kind of how it's deciding what's in these citations. It's essentially measuring that and then surfacing that in these citations and using that as a way to sort of source what gets pulled into that answer. Okay, so I'm kind of talking from a high level here, but this changes the game in terms of what you need to do to succeed in GEO. So the first one is understanding kind of prompt mapping. It means that when you're thinking about demand, so what questions that your customers or prospects have, we really need to focus on cohorts. So we need to understand kind of from first party and third party data, what cohorts matter to us in terms of generating demand, and thinking about how to reverse map those into prompts. So that's kind of question research or prompt mapping that's really important. And that's sort of flipping its head on no longer doing keyword research, but really going into the minds of our ideal customer persona and thinking about what they need, what they might go to search for, and how we might be able to show up. Once we have that, what we can do is we can actually use the same tools. So we can use AI search to then determine what data sources are being pulled in. So is our Google business profiles being pulled in? Is Yelp being pulled in? What are the data sources that we need to start feeding the LLM in order to start influencing it in a positive way? That includes our own page content too, which is super important. Lastly, that kind of fits into the semantic footprint. And this is just the idea that you're semantically growing and getting bigger and aligning closely to what your customers are looking for, either in individual pages or through multiple pages. This could be informational content. This could be your service pages, all sorts of things. Just making sure that you're covering all of where those questions might be going and making sure that you have answers for them that are displayed back to those LLMs. Then lastly, this is the question that a lot of people have, and that's around tracking. So the reality is that the market's still kind of trying to figure this out, but you can use a variety of different sources to sort of corroborate what's growing. So signal versus noise. So log file analysis is key. Tools like Profound, which help us track prompts, Ahrefs and SEMrush, which have some visibility tracking in there too. And what you can get is you can kind of get your signal versus noise on share of voice and overall conversation to conversion rate, which is really key in understanding, is this a demand channel that's working? And all of our prompts that we mapped and the content that we've created and the data sources that we're now improving, is this all mapping to overall visibility that's increasing? So definitely a different workflow in terms of like driving success with Geo.
Yeah, so next we're going to shift gears to the off-page side of things. We're going to talk about backlinks and how you should think about them as part of your larger digital strategy, and then how you can earn them in an increasingly challenging media environment. First, kind of want to take a step back. The industry has long debated the importance of backlinks. It's probably no surprise that the value of backlinks is a highly debated topic. If you do a few different Google searches, you'll find a lot of different information and opinions. There was a time in which a lot of people agreed that backlinks were the top ranking factor for online visibility. Since then, there's been a lot of different statements from Google saying that backlinks do matter, they don't matter, they only matter if they're relevant. It's gone back and forth a lot, and these conflicting narratives have naturally caused a lot of confusion and discourse. So it's hard to know exactly what to believe. So if you fall into that category, I don't blame you, but I'm going to share some data with you that will hopefully bring some clarity to all of that. But first, would love to get your insight. So are you prioritizing backlink building in your PR and SEO strategies? Either yes, either no, we're not prioritizing it, some, but it's not a priority. We want to, we don't know how to start, and yes, it's a main KPI. Early on, we're seeing kind of a wide range of responses kind of across the board. Some people don't prioritize it, some do, but it's not a priority, which I think goes back to that confusion of like, does it matter? Should I be prioritizing it? But Lainey, Patrick, I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that too.
Yeah, seeing a lot of people who want to, but don't know exactly where to start. So we see that, understand where you're coming from there. And hopefully the next couple slides can teach you kind of how that's a priority and how you can get started with that.
Yeah, and if you do fall into that category of you don't know how to prioritize it or you don't know where to start, we've got some slides coming up to you. We keep on a lookout for our last poll. We've got an AI audit that'll help you out with all of that. So be on the lookout for that towards the end of the webinar. But we can move along into a little bit of a timeline on how links have changed and how the value of links has changed over time. So in the 2010s and before, SEO was much more of a numbers game. You could almost manipulate a site's ranking by simply having the highest quantity of backlinks, and it didn't really matter where the links came from so much. And that, of course, led to a lot of what we'd call now black hat tactics, including buying links and doing essentially whatever you could to just boost your numbers. Of course, Google caught on to that pretty quick, and then with the Penguin update in 2012, introduced penalties to sites participating in link schemes, and also coined the term toxic backlinks. Over time, the algorithm has continued to get even smarter at detecting paid links, which of course has led to a shift in buying links to earning them through traditional PR-based tactics. Along the way, we saw things like the rise of disavowing links, real-time evaluation of links, and harsher penalties for buying links. All the while, quality organic links are becoming even more important for rankings, which led people to focus more on the specific types of links that they're building rather than just the sheer volume alone. So that brings us all the way to the 2020 era where AI is starting to take over search. Now, not only do links matter, but so do brand mentions, as Patrick mentioned earlier. Relevancy and authority of the sites that are linking to you are critical. So it's a good idea to target media outlets that cover a wide breadth of different topics and industries. And we'll dig into this a little bit more throughout. But the point is here that there's been this major shift from quantity alone to a lot more extra factors that you should consider when you're putting together your backlink strategy. So links are critical, not just for search engines, but they also influence AI. And to elaborate a little bit more on that, there's two key ways that we're thinking about how links and media mentions influence AI visibility. One is that brand co-citation piece of it, which is that these are really important for training LLMs on who you are and what you do as a business. So when you're getting these media mentions that reference your core offerings, it's essentially associating yourself with that as an authority. You can see this here in action with a travel rewards company. The whole story is not necessarily about upgraded points, but you can see in each of these examples the different phrases that are used by journalists to explain what upgraded points is and essentially why they're talking about them. You can see a travel and credit cards point resource, a perks maximizing site, a lot of different keywords that kind of link them to that core topic. The second piece of this is that OpenAI has contracts with a lot of different media publications for accessing information and then using them as a source in responses. So this includes groups like Hearst, which owns Cosmo, Good Housekeeping, Men's Health, and a lot of different local outlets across the US. Condé Nast, that owns Vogue, Vanity Fair, the New Yorker, Dotdash. There's a lot of different outlets that have these partnerships that are not listed on this slide, which is why it's so important to prioritize media outlets in your outreach strategy, not just focusing on building links and mentions from hyper-relevant sites to your industry. OpenAI essentially has legal access and licensing rights to these sites, so these publications are essentially whitelisted for use in its model, which means that their stories and content can appear directly in ChatGPT outlets. So then if you're being talked in these publications, that content is more likely to train or influence ChatGPT's understanding of you and your industry expertise, which then can in turn increase the odds that ChatGPT will reference your brand or site when serving your responses to users. So backlinks are obviously a critical factor for both rankings and AI overviews, and I promised data. So here are two graphs. Both are from Ahrefs and analyzed key factors that correlate with rankings in traditional SERPs and then also AI overviews. On the left, the graph analyzed the number of backlinks for sites ranking in each position across thousands of keywords, and those in position one clearly had the most backlinks by a wide margin. Now, of course, there's some extraneous factors to this and bias, as sites that are ranking number one naturally tend to be a little bit more authoritative, but it's a good indicator that links are certainly a positive signal for moving up in the SERPs. On the right, you can see that Ahrefs analyzed over 4,300 branded websites across 100,000 keywords. They looked at which brands were mentioned in AI overviews and then correlated that with dozens of SEO and brand metrics. So things like backlinks, domain rating, search volume, brand mentions. And the strongest correlation out of all of those is how often a brand is mentioned on the web, even without a backlink. So that goes back to the point that LLMs are likely prioritizing visibility in natural language across the internet. You can also see strong correlations with things like anchor text and number of backlinks that have some degree of correlation as well, just kind of in a different way than how we would typically think about link equity. So the main takeaway here is that brand mentions matter for AI overviews just as much, if not more, than the links themselves. So it's really important to prioritize a backlink building strategy that's intentional and strategic and going to hit the best of both worlds when it comes to mention and links. Ultimately, it's clear that both media mentions and good old backlinks as we know them are critical for visibility. So as we continue to head deeper into this AI first world, From concepts like co-citations to the general idea of just training LLMs, digital PR is a great strategy to kind of take control of how your brand is presented while continuing to prioritize and optimize your brand's position in traditional SERPs. So I'm going to hand things over to Lainey to talk a little bit more about how you can specifically earn these critical media mentions.
Yeah, as Kalina mentioned, backlinks and brand mentions are huge drivers of online authority, and digital PR is one of the best ways to get them. So what I'm going to cover next is how to brainstorm campaigns that not only land those quick wins, but also set you up with the kind of brand signals that really matter for GEO in the long run. Okay, so what is digital PR? At its core, digital PR is about creating content that earns attentions, backlinks, and brand mentions, not because you ask for them, but because the content itself is valuable. So, in other words, it has to be something that journalists actually want to reference in their own work. That's how we get those organic backlinks to build authority. So, how do we actually get those links today? The key is producing content that lends itself to being linked. So, high authority sites, they want data, they want insights or rankings that can back up their story. Basically, you want to create content that a journalist could drop into their article and say, here's that stat that proves my point. And that's where brainstorming becomes really important, because not every idea that's a great fit for your brand is automatically a good fit for the media. So you kind of have to hit that balance, something that makes sense on your site, but also gives journalists that real value for their own story. So in this section, we're going to kind of talk through how to come up with those ideas, the ones that work for your brand, but also work for journalists. So one of the best ways to find that balance between brand and journalist value is by using what we call tangential content. So tangential content is content that works for your brand. It's connected to what you do, but it's not directly about your products or services. So kind of think of it as a space just outside your core industry. For example, say you're a home service brand. Journalists aren't really going to get excited about a press release on your new window line, but they might care about how much data you have around how much Americans are spending on holiday decorations, or which cities have the worst home maintenance issues. Both are tied to the home, which keeps it relevant to your brand, but they're also broader topics that journalists are really already writing about. So the key here is adjacency. If you're in travel, you might look at tangential angles like food, hospitality, cultural trends. If you're in finance, you could explore cost of living studies, consumer spending habits, holiday shopping data. If you're in healthcare, you could look at mental health, lifestyle habits, etc. So the point is, journalists don't want to publish something that feels like an ad for your brand, but they also don't want content that feels completely random. So if you pitch this idea to a journalist and it sounds like an ad, it's too close to your product. But if you pitch it and the journalist says, "Why are you talking about this?" it's too far. Tangential content kind of lives right in the middle. So one of the biggest keys to making your content linkable is data. Journalists love data. They want stats, they want numbers, and they want insights that they can use to inform their stories. Think about an article on rising rents. A journalist can't just write, rents are going up. They need a number to prove that point. If your brand is the one providing that number, you've just earned yourself a link. When you provide data, you give them a clear reason to link back to you. They need to cite the source. So if you're the source of that data, you've just created a natural backlinking opportunity. And it also helps establish your brand as a trusted authority. Instead of just being another company sending them a pitch, you're actually becoming a resource for them. So you're giving them something that they can't find easily elsewhere. And also keep in mind, journalists get hundreds of pitches every week. So the ones that stand out are really the ones that are bringing something new to the table. A good stat of surprising insight can really make your pitch go from delete to, yes, I can use this in my piece. And I'll talk later about all the different ways you can actually gather this data. But for now, the important thing is to always keep in mind in the back of your mind when you're brainstorming. Ask yourself, what's the number, what's the ranking, or the insight that would make a journalist need to cite me? So when you're brainstorming, there's a few quick things that can make your idea stronger and more appealing to journalists. First, you want to look at what news sites are already covering in the beats that overlap with your industry. If you're in finance, check out what's trending in business news. If you're in healthcare, see what lifestyle or wellness reporters are writing about. It's a good way to stay in touch with what's actually relevant right now in the news. Second, you want to think about timeliness. Journalists love a fresh hook, so that could be an upcoming holiday, an awareness month, or even a quirky national day you can build a story around. So like if you're in food and it's National Coffee Day, perfect chance to tie into caffeine or morning routines or something like that. Third is uniqueness. Journalists don't want the same report they've always seen a dozen times. They want something new. So whether this is a fresh data set, it's a surprise ranking, or just a different angle on an already familiar topic, when you're brainstorming, really ask yourself, has this been done before? And if yes, how can we put a twist on it so it's unique? And finally, don't limit yourself to just one type of journalist. The best campaigns can be pitched to a very wide pool, local reporters, niche beat writers. So for example, if you've got a holiday spending study, that could land with business writers, lifestyle outlets, or even travel reporters, depending on how you frame the story. And the most important thing to remember, I would say, is put yourself in the journalist's shoes. They're not thinking, is this good for the brand? They're thinking, are my readers going to click on this headline? So if you approach brainstorming with that mindset, you're going to come up with stronger and more link-worthy ideas. Okay, so once you've got a bunch of ideas on the table, how do you actually decide which one to run with? What we do is rank each idea across 4 different factors. So first, we've got backlink potential, basically how likely is this idea to grab journalists' attention and result in coverage. If an idea doesn't feel linkable, probably is not going to deliver the results we're aiming for. The second is diverse outreach, meaning can this idea be pitched to different types of journalists, different types of outlets? The more unique angles you can pull from, the bigger your potential outreach pool. The third is subject topicality. Is this tied to what's happening right now in the news or what's coming up in the news cycle? An idea can be amazing, but if it's not timely, it's kind of going to be a tough sell. And the fourth is audience size. So this is about reach. Is the topic going to resonate broadly, or is it only interesting to a tiny niche of people? The bigger your audience pool usually means more coverage opportunities. And internally, we've actually developed a tool that helps us evaluate this. This is what we call our pitch deck ranker. What it does is score our ideas based on those 4 factors I just touched on, but it also compares them against how our similar campaigns have performed in the past. So it's not just saying, is this idea good or is this idea bad? It really gives us insights into why something might perform well or struggle. All right, so let's walk through a real example so you can kind of see how all this comes together. This is a campaign we did for Simple Texting. They're a cloud-based platform that helps with bulk SMS marketing and customer communications for businesses. So naturally, their beats are things like technology, careers, business. So the idea we ran with is the best US cities for hybrid work opportunities. Hybrid work is all about how companies' employees stay connected when they're not in the same place. So that's exactly what Simple Texting is built on, helping businesses reach people quickly and clearly, even when they're apart. So even though the campaign wasn't about texting directly, it tied back to their role in keeping people connected in a modern workplace. And this one worked well for a couple reasons. So first, we had a local angle. Anytime you can break something down by city or state, journalists can localize it. So a reporter in Denver or Dallas can immediately say, here's where our city ranks. Second, it hit multiple beats. So this one applied to business writers, tech reporters, career and workplace writers, lifestyle outlets, even real estate reporters. So that gave us a really wide pool of journalists to pitch. And the last thing was timeliness. Back in 2022, hybrid work was everywhere in the news cycle. So journalists were constantly looking for fresh data and rankings to support their stories, and this gave them exactly that. So this campaign checked all the boxes, made sense for their brand, valuable to journalists, timely, local, relevant across multiple beats, and that's why it earned coverage. All right, so I've got a poll for everyone. What is the most challenging part of earning media coverage? We have finding journalists to pitch the content to, brainstorming concepts, creating an interesting pitch, too time and resource intensive, or I haven't started yet. Yeah, the main one I'm seeing here is too time and resource intensive, which we totally understand, which is why it can be very beneficial to utilize an agency that specializes in digital PR. Definitely a lot of work that goes into it. Also seeing finding journalists to pitch the content to. Finding journalists to pitch the content to and brainstorming concepts, those are usually where clients feel the least confident. And I can completely understand that, especially finding ones that work for your brand and finding journalists to even target the content. So actually, in this next section, I'll dig into how do you find journalists to pitch your content to, and how you can create an interesting pitch that makes them want to cover.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting that finding journalists is so challenging across the board because that I feel like is something that there's obviously a lot of databases that people can kind of just grab journalists and quickly like spam and spray, but those tactics are clearly not working for people, and people are looking for more manual, dedicated, targeted pitching. So I think it's interesting that those poll results kind of reflect that as well.
Yeah, and journalists are looking for that too. They want something that's going to be unique to them and not just, one of mass pitches sent out. So yes, I will definitely dig into that into the next section. Alrighty. So now that we've just talked about how to brainstorm ideas that work for both your brand and journalists, we'll shift gears a little bit. And the next step is figuring out how to actually turn those ideas into full campaigns that earn coverage. So in other words, how do you build something that is truly link-worthy? All right, so once you've chosen your idea, the next step is to actually conduct the study. And that really comes down to two things. You want to find the right data source, and you want to figure out how to shape it into a story. You might use primary data, like running a survey, or you might tap into publicly available data that's already out there. There's a lot you can use, government databases like the census, BLS, or even scraping consumer platforms like Yelp, LinkedIn, social media, breadth of data out there. But the key is to think ahead. Kind of what story do you want this data to tell, and how can you present it in a way that's easy to digest and compelling for journalists? For example, in our hybrid work campaign, we used LinkedIn data. So we scraped job postings by city and then analyzed them to see where hybrid jobs were most available. And that process, collecting the data and shaping it into a ranking, is what turned it into a campaign that journalists could actually use. So once you've got your data, the next step is pulling out the insights that actually matter to journalists. Ask yourself, what stats could stand alone as a headline? If an editor only saw that one number, would they want the full story? And the way you frame it matters too. Saying 30% of something might fall a little fat, but flipping it to 70% don't like it is way more compelling. And don't sleep on the middle ground numbers too. Those can end up being the most surprising. So the key is balance. Insights need to be both credible and surprising. If they're too obvious, they're not going to get picked up. People already know. But if they're too unbelievable, it's not going to be trusted. So you really have to find that middle ground. For example, in our hybrid work campaign, we pulled out different angles from the same data set. So in Atlanta, they had the most hybrid work opportunities, so we were able to pitch Atlanta writers. Boston stood out with nearly 10% of those jobs paying six figures or more. San Francisco and Seattle had more than a quarter of roles that paid six figures. So this gave us three different hooks for three different types of reporters. But at the end of the day, it's not just about collecting numbers. It's kind of about turning those numbers into stories that journalists can actually use. So once you've got your findings, the next step is to add a creative element, basically kind of how you package everything. You want a place for your data to live, and that usually means a landing page or blog post. This gives journalists something to link back to. It puts all your insights in one spot, and it also houses your methodology in case they have questions about how you got the data. So on this page, you want to use graphics, strong copy to tell the story. Journalists are scanning really fast, so make sure your most interesting insights are right on the graphics for easy visibility. The graphics pull them in, and then the copy can go deeper into everything else. And think about scannability overall. Break things up, use headlines, bullet points, visuals, so the page is really easy to skim. The easier you make it for a journalist to grab what they need, the more likely they're going to use it. So once you've got your story ready, the next step is finding the right journalist to pitch it to. This is really where a lot of campaigns succeed or fail, because you can have the best data in the world, but if you're pitching it to the wrong person, it's going to flop. So the first step is to search for journalists who actually cover the beat. For example, you wouldn't pitch a real estate reporter a story about the most popular sports teams. So you want to make sure your insights match what they're already writing about. And think about it from their point of view too. If you pitch them something offbeat, it doesn't just get ignored, it's going to damage your credibility with that journalist. And next, you want to see how many different avenues your data can fit into. Do you have local numbers? That opens the door to local reporters. Do you have stats that tie into business, lifestyle, finance? That expands your pool even more. In our hybrid work campaign, for example, we pitched local outlets in Atlanta and Boston, but we also pitched national career writers, lifestyle outlets, finance reporters. So one data set, but multiple pools of journalists. And when it comes to actually finding those contents, You can use a media database to find the contacts, or you can do it manually. Manual outreach takes a little bit more time, but it can be just as effective, and sometimes even better, because you're taking the time to find the exact right fit for your story. We've actually even created our own tool for finding and targeting journalists. It lets us search by beat and topic, and we built an internal database of journalists we know regularly cover data-driven stories. On top of that, we also track our own coverage. So if a journalist covers one of our campaigns, we add them to that database. And the tool pulls from RSS feeds too, so we can see their recent articles. That way we're really searching by what they already write about, not just a generic beat label. All right, so now that you've got your story and the right journalist, the most important step is pitching it. First thing, when it comes to pitching, never rely on one pitch. Draft subject lines, different ones, different body versions, so you can really test what works, because what grabs one journalist's attention might not grab the other. But subject lines are half the battle. Journalists skim their inbox in seconds, so you really want to personalize when you can. Add location names, use signals like new data or 2025 data. 2025 survey, just to show it's fresh content. So for example, for our hybrid work campaign, we pitch with subject lines like new study, Atlanta ranks #1 for hybrid work opportunities, or where are the most hybrid jobs in 2025? New data reveals the top cities. And once they click, your email body should be short and scannable. Quick context, then get straight to the insights. Bullets work really well here. If you've got a graphic, include that too. But for pitching, you really just want to stay flexible. One journalist might want the local angle, another might care about salaries. So adjust your pitch to fit who you're pitching it to. And finally, always give them a reason to click through your full article. That's where your data set and your methodology live. But at the end of the day, with pitching, your job isn't to promote your brand in a pitch. It's about to share a story worth covering. So keep it short, keep it clear, fresh, and you're going to stand out in their inbox. All right, so now that we've talked strategy, we'll look at actually what this looks like in practice. So this was the hybrid work study I've been mentioning throughout. For simple texting, this ended up earning 32 backlinks with an average domain authority of 61. But not just about the numbers, this is how it was actually covered. So for example, The Street went with the headline, want to make 6 figures without going into an office, move to these cities, and they cited directly simple texting. It said, according to a recent report from text messaging platform Simple Texting, ... CNBC also was one of the main pieces of coverage. They had the headline, the 10 best cities for finding a hybrid job that pays 100K or more. And again, included the line, according to a report from Simple Texting, a text message platform. And then Go Banking Rates covered it as well, 10 best cities for 6-figure hybrid jobs. And then their anchor text there was Simple Texting identified the best cities for 6-figure hybrid work opportunities. So what's powerful about this coverage is it's working on 2 levels. First, there's the obvious SEO value. The links are building authority and help simple texting rank better in traditional search results. But second, and this is where the GEO piece comes in, every article didn't just mention the brand name, it also reinforced what the company does. So Simple Texting, a text messaging platform. And that phrasing is what's teaching AI tools like ChatGPT and AI Overviews to associate the brand name with its category. And the more often that phrasing appears across credible outlets, the stronger those connections get. And another important piece of this is the longevity. Because hybrid work is still such a relevant topic, this study doesn't just make an impact in the first couple weeks when we're actively pitching. As long as this is on Simple Texting site, it has the potential to keep getting discovered, cited, and linked to over time. And every one of those touch points adds to the brand signals that matter for both SEO and GEO. So the big takeaway here is that earned media isn't just building your visibility in Google SERPs, it's also shaping how AI systems understand, describe, and ultimately are recommending your brand.
Cool.
I'll back to Kalina.
Yeah, thanks, Lainey. So just to kind of wrap up a little bit, I briefly want to touch on a few recommendations for measuring and framing success, as it is somewhat of an abstract concept that can be hard to track. So my general recommendation is that the more you track, the more data you have, which means the more insights you have to then inform and shape future campaigns. So the more metrics, the merrier. But baseline, you should obviously be tracking the number of links that you get per each campaign and all of the media coverage that doesn't link to it as well. It's important to track this on an ongoing basis. As Lainey mentioned, you're going to get links beyond the initial promotion period. So make sure you go back to it and check and see if it's gotten any new links since then. I recommend checking back in maybe like quarterly to capture any new links that you might have earned. And then you should also look at characteristics about those links, at minimum, some kind of measure of quality. So whether that's domain rating from Ahrefs, domain authority from Moz, this just kind of gives you some insight into the overall authority of the site and the ultimate value of those backlinks. That being said, don't write off a low DRDA site, especially if it's relevant to you and if it's a unique referring domain to your site. It can be really beneficial from an SEO perspective. Speaking of backlink profiles, you should holistically track the number of referring domains to your entire site. This is a really great way to measure how your campaigns are performing together and holistically as your visibility is increasing. And then finally, you should also track your own domain rating and your own authority on a regular basis. This is an indicator of your own personal authority, which will ultimately translate into your own ability to rank on traditional SERPs, though it can be a much harder metric to move. I've got some more stats on that, but gonna jump ahead a bit to this free AI visibility audit. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Patrick, to chat through this.
Yeah. So I want to lean into this because there's a lot that we've chatted about here. I'm sure there's more that you have questions about. And I just want to say, we had to relearn a little bit, maybe a year ago. We wanted to learn how these new search engines were working. What we did is we reviewed a lot of patents, we performed tests, we learned first, right? And then we took that learning and we're now starting to apply it to clients. We built proprietary technology around our learning too, what we found. So I think the hardest thing here is just taking all this learning for all of y'all, right? Taking all this learning and applying it to your business, your website, your product, your service. That's really where you learn the most, right? Is in that application layer. Well, our free audit will help fill some of those gaps. So where do I need to push on? Do I need to push on some of those external factors like Lady and Cleaner are talking about? Do I need to push on some of those owned factors? So the internal pages, things like that, some of the things that I was talking about, where are the gaps that I need to start filling to increase my visibility in AI search? So that's what this free visibility audit is, and it should be helpful for you and your business, which is what we want to do. So.
Cool. Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we'll leave that up as we close out here, but want to go back to this concept of domain rating and potential increases that you can expect, just to kind of frame things up a little bit. We've done a lot of research on domain rating within our own client base of sites that we've worked with for several years across a lot of different campaigns. And we've found that the average client tends to see a rough 3-point DR increase each year. Of course, this varies a lot. The higher you get, the harder the metric is to move. The more campaigns you do, the quicker you'll move. So there's a lot of different factors at play here, but that's a general baseline to kind of give you some expectation. You can see if you are starting with a lower DR. So if you're starting under that 20 threshold, you can expect to see an increase of closer to like 6 points per year. So double that. If you're in the 20 to 60 range to start, you might see more of a midline average 3 DR point increase each year. And then if you're well above that, if you're starting with a DR of 60 plus, you may see an average of just about a half point each year. And that might not sound like a lot, but a site with a DR of 60 plus is already a really strong established one. So increasing authority is that much more competitive and more challenging. And then at the same time, increasing authority is almost that much more important because you have to keep up with your likely very authoritative competitors. But of course, you can always double down on these strategies to help speed up results. Ultimately, though, this kind of goes to show that patience is really a virtue with link building, and you can't expect to see results overnight, but with consistency, you will see improvements, which translates into broader business impact. So to kind of bring it back to simple texting, which is the examples that Lainey has shared previously, we've worked with them for several years across a lot of different campaigns and seen some pretty strong results. Over the course of 6 years, we've executed 20 campaigns, and you can see that referring domains have increased by more than 5 times, from under 1,000 starting to now over 6,400. Similarly, their domain rating has jumped 10 points from 70 to 80, which is really significant given that they already started a really strongly established reputation. And then the authority the authority increase translated to a 300% increase in keywords ranking in positions 1 through 3. Obviously, we can't take all of that credit from the digital PR perspective. That also requires a really strong SEO strategy for optimal results, but just kind of goes to show that when everything is working together in synergy, you'll see more dramatic results at a much faster pace. And then finally, that doesn't stop at traditional search rankings. With the coverage that we're building over time, we're not only building link equity, but also increasing simple texting's overall authority, earning mentions, linking them back to the concept of SMS marketing, as Lainey shared. So now when you search for things like SMS marketing platforms, simple texting is being pulled into those recommendations, first by this AI overview, and then also third with the ChatGPT prompt. And again, those geo strategies that Patrick mentioned at the top of the call are playing a major role into this, but want to highlight that this strategy can tie back into your priority products and services and ultimately help you increase your conversions and revenue with a sustained, consistent strategy. So I'm going to hand things over to Kim to wrap things up.
Thanks, Kalina. So if you love this webinar, please feel free to attend our upcoming webinar. We've got From Affiliates to Full Funnel. This is actually a really amazing case study story, and we'll have a client joining us for this. It's on Wednesday, October 15th. If you're interested, we will drop a link to sign up in the chat. If you decide that you're interested later, you can visit us at gofishdigital.com and check out our webinar page. And let's move into Q&A because we have so many and we have 10 minutes. All right, so Patrick, I know this one is for you, and I know what you're going to say, but we'd all love to hear it. Would keyword stuffing be more advantageous in this new environment?
Yeah, the opposite. So no. So the research that we've done shows that semantic alignment, which means less about keyword stuffing and more about subject matter alignment, drives higher results. But also, if you just kind of put in a study by a couple of students at Princeton, we're looking at GEO, and you can just kind of put this into Google. You can put generative engine optimization plus like PDF, and it'll show up. They actually highlighted some of the same tactics that we found, which is the increase of statistics, quotes from experts, basically higher authority content that you're putting in there, more unique insights are going to drive more results. And if you think about it from a benchmark, it's really because what those LLMs are out there to go and do is knowledge capture. So that means that they want to find information, they want to store it, and they want to be able to use it to address questions that their end users have. So sort of the inverse, basically, no more keyword stuffing, probably a lot more insight stuffing if you want to think about it like that.
Awesome. I've got another one for you, Patrick. Christina said, should FAQ pages get built out in a robust manner for LLMs?
So probably yes, but the truth is that probably multiple footprints matter. So having a Wikipedia page, having a Crunchbase page, having a Google Business Profile, all of those data sources are going to be used in that grounding method that these LLMs basically deploy to ensure that they're serving information that's accurate. So they want to look at trusted sources. Those trusted sources include what Lainey and Kalina are talking about, where they're validating it against what media publications have said about you, but they're also looking at that kind of first or second party data, which is basically, your profiles and where you exist, and ensuring that you're a real business. Kind of teeters on a little bit of that like EEAT sense, but in short, yes, if you can get there, but also think about it more broadly in the sense that you want to have a footprint about your entity, and that entity is basically your brand. And how well does Google know the brand so it can start to sort of trust that against the demand execution that you're doing?
Okay, and one more quick one for you, Patrick. Is it important to have a Wikipedia page for your company?
Yes, definitely. Did I answer that one? Did I answer them backwards?
No, no, no.
Okay, I might
All
have
right.
messed up.
Kalina, I believe this one is for you. Backlinks get tricky with B2B because our vendors that we partner with are also competitors. So there are some that are more than willing to link back to distributors for their products, but companies like Square sell their own paper and won't link back. What other outlets would a B2B have to leverage?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it goes back to Lainey's point of tangential content and really just thinking a lot broader. Just because you're B2B doesn't mean that you can only pitch B2B content. You can kind of think of like things in the business or career or something that's like adjacent to your space in your industry. That makes sense to come from you, but then you can also pitch that out to media outlets. Media outlets typically aren't competitors. So and they're always looking for stories and things to cover and new things to talk about and new ways to frame them. So really any media outlet might be interested in your content depending on if you come up with the right type of content that's in that right tangential space.
Thank you. We've got one from Autumn. Backlinks, regarding backlinks, is it better to place something with a publication where these LLMs have relationships with? Is this something brands should prioritize?
Yeah, I think that's certainly a good strategy. As I mentioned, it helps increase your likelihood of getting cited in ChatGPT. But that's not to say that other links that don't have partnerships with OpenAI aren't good. They are still beneficial in their own ways. So I think it's good to have a holistic approach when you're targeting both those types of media outlets, but you're not limiting yourself to those because you never want to limit yourself in these earned media types of strategies.
Thank you. Another quick question on Wikipedia pages. Do we help create Wikipedia pages for companies?
We do not know.
You not? Okay. An additional question from John. Curious, how intensive on average is the research on preparation for creating link-worthy campaigns and stories? Because in my experience, most clients don't have that kind of budget.
Yeah, that's a great question. Lainey, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. Our production phase for our digital PR campaigns are about 4 to 6 weeks. So yes, they are pretty intensive and definitely resource heavy, but we find that journalists that actually or clients that actually pay for links ends up costing way more than a digital PR strategy because uh, they're not cheap to buy. So this more organic strategy ends up being a little bit more affordable for our clients. But yes, completely understand that not every client has the budget for big resource heavy digital PR campaigns.
Another question, Dalton. What do you recommend for taking advantage of backlinks organically without having to pitch to other journalists who may or may not utilize your data in the way you intend?
Yeah, that's another good question. I would say if you're going this digital PR route where you're creating a campaign landing page, it's important to help to optimize your page for keywords and even for AI visibility. So that increases your likelihood of that page getting shown up to somebody like a reporter that might be writing a story. That being said, it's much more predictable if you're actively pitching and delivering the content into their inbox. You're making it a lot easier for them. Otherwise, you're just kind of like hoping and waiting for them to search and waiting for the right person to be writing the right story at the right time and then looking for your source. So it's a much more active strategy if you're pitching, and we definitely recommend that piece of the puzzle.
Another question from Dalton. How do backlinks differ from embedded links to other items or sources like another product listing or a YouTube video?
Patrick, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really is around how you're being referenced. So Kalina had that, or yeah, I believe it was Kalina had the screenshot a little bit around like kind of the way that your brand is being included semantically. So the wording around it, the article around it, so to speak. Google kind of considers articles almost like paragraphs in its patents, right? So when you think about kind of like that semantic embedding there, you might not even really need the backlink, right? Just the mention of your brand in specific ways is going to actually feed a lot of those systems. So if you're trying to say, hey, I'm an authority or I'm a subject matter expert in Y, you sort of need all the other parties to also agree with you on that. And you kind of need to push both up, right, and up and to the right. But that embedded format is really like the sense that really what you're thinking about is how you're being referenced and what you're being referenced about and how that's going to feed into the data collection that these LLMs are doing. So that's I'd say like kind of some of the differences. Hopefully it answers that question there. But let me know if it didn't. Yeah.
All right, we've got two left. Samantha, are there publicly available media databases and any suggestions on a company that manages multiple businesses? We have a management company under our name and B2B. Then we manage 140 plus storage facilities across the US, each with their own name, brand, etc.
Lainey, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I was going to say publicly available, yes, but they normally come with a cost. So the more information on these media databases, I believe the question's about finding journalists. So yeah, the more information on them, the more specific they are, the more expensive they are. But there are tools out there and media bases in terms of finding journalists.
Okay, and we also had another question come in, so still two. Free AI models sometimes use old media articles that aren't updated in over a year or more as a source. How do we navigate that?
Should I take that one?
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, that's a tough one. There are definitely some older pieces of information that are being pulled into these LLM models. I can see sort of even some articles from back in like 2024 that are being included in citations. It's hard to say what might show up and what might not. If you were to ask me, that's a very good question because I don't have a great answer. But if you were to ask me, I would say start to think about your cohorts as much as possible, right? So that means what questions do they have? Really honing in on those cohorts and then kind of seeing what sources are appearing from there and then trying to create your target list from that. So then at least that way, then you can say, hey, I want to go back to these older sources that are still being pulled in. And you can start to kind of prioritize based on really where the demand generation is that you're trying to connect versus just thinking, kind of more broadly. And then that way, if there is someone that's from back in 2024 that you really want to reach out to, you have the value behind it for the work that you're going to go do to hopefully get that sort of recovered. So that's probably the way that I would think about it is just keep thinking about that demand.
Great. Excuse me. The last question. Are there other platforms aside from the ones that we featured, which are quoted, Harrow and featured.com, that are effective for pitching journalists?
Yeah, actually, John, we just use good old email. So that's kind of our bread and butter, building relationships with journalists directly and pitching them personalized stories. We've kind of found that that's the way you get bigger and kind of more authoritative placements is building that relationship via email.
All right, that's all of the questions. We got through 11 questions in 11 minutes. Thank you so much, Kalina, Lainey, and Patrick. You are phenomenal, and this was just a really information-rich webinar. So thank you all so much. And thanks to everyone who attended. We hope to see you in our upcoming webinar on 10/15.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.